All right. Good evening, everyone. Allison Schaberg here. Tonight, we are here with ADDA, the Attention Deficit Disorders Association, the Southern Region. They have been around since 1987, and there are support groups. So this is like a ADD, ADHD support group. This particular group, we're out of Fort Bend County. We do have people attend our meetings from all over the state, so it's okay if you're not from Fort Bend County. So our group is predominantly more of a parent group for parents that have kids that are ADD or ADHD. And so our meetings are free, and we've been meeting by Zoom for a couple of years now because of COVID. We actually did used to meet in person, and we had a kid group that met while the parents met. It was really great. So maybe one day we'll get back to that. Seems like just as soon as we think that we might be able to get back together in person, then COVID starts flaring again, so anyway, we're just still being careful on that. And for a lot of families, I think it's easier to attend by Zoom anyway. So usually the last Tuesday of every month, we have a webinar. We have a guest speaker. They talk about different topics each and every month. So it's never the same. And tonight we are excited to have Kristen Davis with us tonight. She's going to be talking about vocational rehab, also known as VR. And we were talking earlier that this is like this is a well-kept secret. A lot of people are confused on the differences between Workforce Solutions and Workforce Commission. And so Kristen is going to talk to us about that tonight. So if you're planning your schedule, let's talk about housekeeping for a second. We will not go past 7:30. So 6:30 to 7:30 if you're planning your evening, and inquiring minds want to know. You guys are also in webinar mode. And what that means is that we can't see you or hear you, but we do know that you're there. And we do want to answer as many questions as we can as this webinar goes on. So if you'll put your questions in the chat box, I'm going to be watching that chat box. And when we have a question, I'm going to read them out to Kristen, and we're going to answer as many questions as we can. We're not saving the questions for the end, so don't be shy. If you've got a question, somebody else probably has the question too. So thanks for partnering with us on that. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, and tomorrow, anybody who registered for this webinar is going to get a copy of the slides as well as a link for the recording. So having said that, Kristen, it is our pleasure to have you with us tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Allison, and thank you everyone for joining us here this evening. As already stated, my name is Kristen Davis. I am the Regional Transition Program Specialist for the Gulf Coast area of VR services. We're known as Texas Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehabilitation, but if you're ever looking for us or you want to know who we are, you will always be able to find us if you look for VR. So this is just pretty much an introduction, a little bit about what I do. I am not a counselor. You will learn about how to get to a counselor. I am the program specialist, which means I interact with counselors based on policy. I help staff cases. I liaise with the school districts and with the educational service centers, as well as other entities that we have relationships with. And I manage all of our summer programs. So right now I'm managing Summer Earn and Learn and our paid work experience programs, our STEM camps, and a lot of other things that I'm going to talk to you about this evening. Okay, so first, what are VR services? Vocational rehabilitation. A lot of people have heard of us. At one point, you may have heard of us as DARS. Now we're under the Texas Workforce Commission. Before that, we were TA. So we have different ways that people may have known us, but again, we'll always be known as vocational rehabilitation. So what are we here for? Well, vocational rehab has been around for at least 100 years. We're one of the very oldest agencies in this country, and we were founded because of our veterans coming back from war and needing to be reacclimated back into the world of work. Of course, that has changed and along the years, and we've become something outside of just our veterans needing us. We also have the VA for that, but we have still maintained that we rehabilitate people who need our services to go back to work. So at our core, that's who we are. We are here to help people either find a job or keep the job they already have or move up in a job. VR services are eligibility based, so that's very important. I want people to get that we are different than what you may see when someone's in school, because it's entitlement based. But once you get out of school or once you're trying to find a job, we go with the ADA on a national level. And that means that services are based on someone who's eligible for services and that they're not entitled. They are not emergency services. So if you need something right away, we may not be the right agency, but they are not time limited. That means we don't go long term, but we are also not just going to say, okay, it's been a year, you need to go. We don't do that. We are going to stay with you until you are gainfully employed or until you decide you don't need our services anymore. Another thing to point out, they are arranged by our vocational rehabilitation counselor with consideration for individual choice. What does that mean? That means that we have counselors who are the experts on vocational rehabilitation services and disability in general, but you are the expert on you. So while they are going to suggest services, they also want to take into account what it is that you want for yourself. This is a partnership. So in order to access full VR services, we have a bit of an eligibility criteria. So first, there has to be an impairment. There has to be disability that we can see that is written down. It's on paper. It's a diagnosed disability of some sort. For our students, usually that could be an IEP or an art piece of art paperwork, a 504 plan, anything like that that suggests, hey, this student has a disability. With adults, is maybe a doctor's note, or even with a student, it can be a doctor's note as well, but just something that is in writing that says what the disability is. Second, the impairment has to cause a substantial impediment to employment. That means it's getting in the way of work. So I wear glasses, but according to this criteria, I don't necessarily need any help from VR because I already have my glasses and I can go to work. So that may not be the right agency for me because I don't need them to do anything further. Also, third, the customer requires our services to prepare for, enter in, or engage in, or advance in competitive integrated employment. That means you need VR to give you something in order to be successful at work, whatever that may be. It may be a job coach. It may be some type of trainer. It may be autism spectrum disorder supports. But basically, we have to see that this customer needs us in order to be successfully employed. Fourth and last, the customer can achieve an employment outcome. So that means that we have to know when we find you eligible, or we have to believe that we can achieve employment with this customer and not sheltered workshop employment, because that is a different viable set of employment circumstances, but competitive integrated employment, meaning we think you can go to work with people that have disabilities or not, and you will make over minimum wage. So we have to believe that you can achieve that. And that is the only way that we will close your case successful.
Okay, I have a couple of questions because we probably do have people from other parts of the state. So, and sometimes we have people from out of state. The bottom line is VR is a service that is available all across the U.S. It's not just in Texas. We are in Texas, and we're talking about Texas tonight. But VR, you're going to want to look up your state services in your state for vocational rehab. And then just another question here. So in an example, if we have a child or a loved one that is, can you just give us an example of someone that you guys might not believe has the ability to work? Is this somebody that's nonverbal could still have the ability to work? So can you give us an extreme circumstance of who doesn't have the ability to work, please?
Sure. And that's a good question because we come across this a lot. So firstly, I need to let you guys know, at least in the state of Texas, we are not supposed to ever refuse you an application for vocational rehabilitation services, whether we think you can work or not. If you want to apply for services, we are supposed to allow you that application. So that's the first thing. Even if they say, oh, well, I don't know, it may not be a good fit, they are not supposed to do that. Let us know if they do. but you were supposed to at least get the application. Now, once you have the application, when we're looking at someone for eligibility, very rarely are we just going to outright say, I don't think you can work. We may have some people, and I'll use an example. We had a student that could not ambulate alone. That means they couldn't walk on their own. They had a diaper, they had a bib, not quite vegetative state, but very, very unresponsive. So if, as a counselor looking at the student, you may think, well, I don't know that they have the ability to work. However, and in the case I'm thinking of, they were not able to work. However, we still had to go through the motions. So when you're doing eligibility, please note this, this note at the very bottom of this PowerPoint. I didn't read over that one, but they talk about pre-eligibility trial work. What that means is that we put them in a simulated work setting and found that they could not do what we were simulating. That's the only time we can absolutely say this person can't work. So the example I gave was someone who can't move around, who can't go to the bathroom, who can't talk to me. All of that together make me think that possibly, I'm not sure if you can work or not. I would put that in a case note, but I still would have to prove that this person cannot work. So we're never going to just look and say, no, you can't do it. We have to prove it. So that may be through assessments, that may be through the pre-eligibility trial work, but our policy says, and our policy is public knowledge as well. If you Google Texas Workforce Commission, it should take you straight to our policy. So you can look at it. We cannot just refuse an application. We cannot just say you can't work. You have to prove it. So I hope that helped answer the question, Allison.
Yes, and I know that from my kids, and I know that the assessments that you guys order are different, and because every case is different, every individual is different, and these are tailored to the individual. But I know that my kids did a vocational evaluation, and it was like a 5-day assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really good and really valuable. So that was like an example of one of the tests that you guys might do, or to prove or disprove, what the impediments are to employment. So I know that was one example, along with like the neuropsych testing and things like that. And I guess it's different for everybody, but thank you for clarifying that.
Of course, and it will be different. And I also want to point out, if we've had lots of cases where we may have a parent come in and say, I know that there's something there, but I'm not sure what's going on, but I've noticed these deficits. I've noticed that my child's having trouble with this. It's okay to come to the counselors and say that. We don't necessarily go fishing where we just go looking for diagnosis, but if there is seriously an impediment or something we see going on, we can tell. We don't mind getting the evaluation to figure out exactly what it is that's happening.
So in that vein, I just want to talk about that a little bit further. So they don't have to have the whole long laundry list of diagnosis in hand if they have an IEP or a 504, if they've got some suspected things, or maybe the kid's taking medication for ADHD or something like that. Maybe they're taking medications for certain things like depression or anxiety, whatever. It's okay if they don't have all the rest of the diagnosis in hand, because part of the assessments that you guys do identify other impediments that might be there to employment. Is that correct?
Correct. And we do go a lot on self-report as well as counselor observation. So if you come in and we know you're taking, I don't know, Adderall, and you say, I'm taking it for ADHD. That's enough of an inkling to say, okay, clearly, there's something, even if we don't have it in hand. But if you come in and you're an actual student and you have that IEP or 504, that's good enough for transition services, which I'm going to talk about shortly as well. That is enough to suffice. Of course, if there are other things going on, I've had people that came in and maybe they had a learning disability, but I saw maybe they are on the autism spectrum. We can still get tested for more things. Some people don't want that. That's fine too. It's up to you. But it is advisable, if the counselor's wanting you to get a few more tests, then perhaps there's something that they see that will help. And we also need to know as much as we can to help with placements later on when we're looking for jobs. So it helps to kind of know everything. But please, if you don't have something written, don't let that stop you for sure. Please still come in and talk to the counselor about the situation.
Good idea. And then also, if your loved one is already getting SSI and Medicaid, that's a pretty good indication that the individual has a disability, because you don't get that really, So you can look at from that perspective too. They look at all things. That's the main thing, is don't shy away from it, because maybe you don't have all those diagnoses in hand. I know a lot of us do, but the bottom line is you guys help with that.
Yes. And we do, again, you guys, public knowledge on that policy, please read it if you ever just want to know. We promise we're not making you jump through hoops for no reason. But if you get Social Security, please let the counselor know that, because that will lead to something called presumptive eligibility, where we go ahead and say you're eligible, even, if we don't have all of our testing back. And you can always still not benefit from services, and we can still close the case, but that helps expedite the process. Sometimes if you know you're getting Social Security, that will definitely help you. It won't harm you. And that also will help with wage-based services like tuition and maintenance for clothing or something like that. If you get Social Security, you will not be participating in costs for that. So it is very important to bring your Social Security information. Along that same line, I do want to point out that employment services are always free. So I'm talking about tuition and buying a computer or something like that for school. That may be where we require someone to participate in the cost, but employment services, we will never, never, never ask you to participate in the cost for that. So just wanted to point that out as well. So I'm now going to talk specifically about transition services and what we do as a transition program specialist. This is kind of my area of expertise. But again, I want to point out, even if you're not in transition, if you're an adult looking for services, you're no longer in school, we can still definitely serve you. Our bigger program is for adults, so keep that in mind as well. So what are our transition services for? They are a subset of our vocational rehabilitation program, and they're here to help students bridge that gap between high school and then going to work or being able to live independently. So we tend to partner with our schools for this type of service. We can take students as young as 14. So if your student is 14, go ahead and start talking to them about VR services, what we can do, and just encouraging them to get their feet wet in our services, because the goal is for them to leave school with a plan. We have too many students that graduate to the couch. And because of that, the federal government challenged all of us, including the state of Texas, to develop more programming for our students, so we're able to ensure that they kind of have that plan when they're graduating. So the goal here in transition is not necessarily employment yet. We're getting to that when they're an adult, but as a transition student getting services from us, our goal is to train them and to explore and learn about what works and start getting that plan together. So you'll kind of see that theme as I talk about these services that are available. So we've got our transition services, and they can incorporate everything, but the focus of it is our pre-employment transition service and their categories. So when we talk about pre-employment, that the key word there is pre-employment. These are things that we do with you before you start looking for work and before we place you in employment. So the goal is to have our transition counselors kind of work with you, train you up, get you ready for the world of work. And then when you're ready and you're an adult, we go ahead and go into that job placement, into making sure that you have everything you need to be in permanent, competitive, integrated employment. So the 5 categories are career exploration, work-based learning, counseling on post-secondary opportunities, job readiness, and self-advocacy. So most of the services that we give our students 14 to 22 are based in these 5 categories, are usually going to fall in one of them. So with career exploration, this is one of our favorite things to do with our students 14 to 22. It is just like it says, just finding out what works, learning about different careers, learning about different jobs you can have, what's required of those jobs, what you need to do to be able to work that job, and just anything in between, where we spend a lot of time with these customers working on what do you want to do. One of our favorite things to do with our students in this age group is the Berkman questionnaire. And it is so thorough. I highly recommend it. You do have to be computer literate to take it, but it is a service that we offer to our students. And when they finish, it tells you what your best work environment is. It also tells you the clusters that you would fall into, the things that you should never want to do, and also things that you may need to work on before you're ready to go to work. So for example, I took one, And it told me that my top interests were being creative, doing any of the arts, anything like that. And it also broke down the clusters of how I prefer to work. Do I like to work alone? Do I like to work in groups? So it gives all of this great information that you can take with you when you're looking into jobs or even looking at different work experiences. So that's an example of career exploration services that we provide. Second is our work-based learning category. This is probably the most popular service here in the Houston area. Different parts of the state have different favorites, but here in Houston, we love some work-based learning. Right now, over the summer, our biggest example is our summer earn and learn program, where our students get to work temporarily in an experience and make $10 an hour for that experience. So as you can imagine, who doesn't like getting paid? That's very, very popular. It's a partnership that we have with our career offices, but we also have one that is VR driven only within our agency, and it's called Paid Work Experience Year Round. And with that one, it's the same premise, but the customer can work up to 12 weeks instead of the 5 to 8 that we see with Summer Earn and Learn, and it can be any time of the year. One of the more popular ways we do this now is we work with our schools to do community-based vocational instruction, and then we supplement the wages. So they're already going out in the community with the school, but then we come in and say, well, we'll pay you to do that and kind of coach you up. And then hopefully when you graduate, we can get you a job in that industry. So again, super popular service. Third is our counseling on post-secondary opportunities. We talk a lot about school with our students because some of them may want to go ahead and graduate and work, but we also have customers who they want to go to college. And so we talk about what that looks like. We talk about getting you linked with disability services. We do college tours, you name it. But one thing that is not included in here is tuition. I do want to point that out. Tuition is under full VR services, but the actual counseling on post-secondary does not include us paying for tuition. That is under a different category. And I'll talk about that in just a second.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure that you clarify that, because there's some confusion, because there's like pre-ETs and Summer Earn and Learn over here and VR over here. And although you all do kind of work together, there are some things that are still siloed. And I think there's a lot of confusion in our community of who's doing what and where the bigger, better services, where the more expensive testing and assessments comes in. So I do want you to identify the differences, please. When you, and that's fine if you've got a slide on that. Thank you.
And I'll do it in pieces. So I'll start it here, and then the second slide kind of brings it home. So with the transition services, I want to clarify this as much as I can. So transition can go along with VR. So we have people that get full VR services and these pre-employment transition services together. The only difference is where you are in the VR phase. So I do want to emphasize that it is always the vocational rehabilitation counselor who will give you any of these services. So if you want any of them, pre-ETS or VR, employment tuition, anything, you have to go through a counselor. I get that question a lot too. Sometimes people mistake our counterparts at Workforce Solutions for us. They can provide services, but they cannot provide pre-ETS nor VR services, different set of services. So for all of this, you have to locate a VR counselor. Just keep that in your head, has to be VR. Now with pre-ETS, and I'll talk a bit about this on the next slide as well, you can get that before you get full VR services. And that's what this is. So sometimes we have students who don't want full VR. They just want to come in and maybe do Summer Earn and Learn, or maybe do work experience, or maybe go on a college tour, maybe do our STEM camps, which are technically career exploration. But you can still decide after you're getting those services, hey, I really still want to get VR. So you can still apply for more. So VR is everything. VR is pre-ETS and the other traditional services. If you're only getting pre-ETS, you cannot access VR. But if you get VR, you can definitely access pre-ETS as long as you're in the age range. Does that help, Allison? Does that help kind of answer it? And I'll touch on it some more in just a second here as well.
Yes, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that is good. And so we do have someone that's saying, how do we locate our VR counselor in the Houston area? Thank you.
Good question. I will answer that in just a second. I do have a slide for that one. I will answer that one. But it'll be a couple of slides. So hold tight for me, and I'll run through these really quick, and then I can get to that question. So really quickly, also just want to touch on the job readiness and self-advocacy. Job readiness is our bread and butter as VR counselors. That is us training the student, the adult, anyone on how to get ready for work, how to talk to your employer, how to ask for a raise, how to ask for your accommodations, how to know who to talk to about your accommodations. Little things like even asking to go to the bathroom. We've had so many students that say, well, I need to go to the bathroom, but I don't want to get in trouble. And part of this is even teaching them that when is it okay to ask to go to the restroom. So job readiness is one of our biggest services for everyone in VR, but especially our students, because we spend a lot of time training them. We do have providers that come into the schools and train the customers if the school allows. We also can do it on weekends. We can do it outside of the school, in the libraries. If the provider that we hire has their own place to do the training, we do that as well. So we're pretty flexible with that. It's also virtual now. Since COVID happened, they allowed us to let our providers be virtual. So this is probably the most widespread service, the easiest to get to, because they're very much accessible. And then self-advocacy is pretty much training the student on how to advocate, how to get them to say, no, I need these things in order to be able to do my job. Even Social Security and navigating that is a part of self-advocacy as well. So anything the counselor identifies that the student needs can be utilized through that self-advocacy service. So altogether, those 5 core services make up pre-employment transition services. And again, you can access them before full VR or in tandem with VR. You can do both together. So I do want to, this kind of answers the question that we just had. We do want to differentiate a little bit between who your VR counselors are. So when we're talking about transition services, you could run into 2 different types of counselors. You can have a VRC, which is an adult caseload carrying counselor. They work mostly with adults and may have some kids here or there, maybe one school assignment. Or you will have a TVRC, which is a transition VR counselor, and they only work with schools and students. So that is the difference. You'll hear some counselors say, oh, I'm a VRC or I'm a TVRC. The difference is that TVRCs are going to have way more access to the schools. They'll be there more often, but you can also utilize your VRC within their office at any time as well. They just may not spend as much time at the schools. But the important thing that I want you to get from that is that if you have a counselor, there should be no interruption in services, whether they are a VRC or TVRC, because the services are the same. So there should never be a time where they say, oh, well, I can't do that for you. That's only TVRCs. That should never happen. You should always get the same exact services. And it says here, the majority of schools do have a counselor assigned. So if your student is in high school, check and see who the VR counselor is. You can also ask me, hey, who's the counselor assigned at this school? Because that's how we take our referrals. You go through the school and you go to their assigned counselor. That doesn't mean you have to have the school sign you up. It just means you're going to go by who is assigned to that school. You can always talk with me again and say, hey, I go to this school, or my student goes to this school. Can you tell me who we contact? And I can give you the contact information as well. If they don't have a counselor assigned, we usually will refer you to your closest office where you would be coupled with a VRC. Again, no interruption in services at all. If that ever happens, please let me know. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this. This is kind of what I was talking about before with the federal government noticing there was a gap there and challenging us as a state to say, or as a country to say, hey, what can we provide for these students that want these services or that are graduating to the couch and don't have any plans? So that's where WIOA comes in. Again, they talk a little bit more about WIOA. The thing I want you to get from this slide is that we have a ton of money to spend on our students with disabilities. A lot of money. We've been challenged to spend it. And if we don't spend it, the government has said they will take back a lot of the VR funding. So it is not just our pleasure to spend the money. We are mandated to spend this money on our students and provide them as many services and as much dedication as we possibly can document.
We just had a question. Do you come to every school, or is it only certain schools? And so while you're talking about that, like, let's talk about public high schools for a moment, and then what about private schools?
Good question. So we have around, last time I counted, Houston area has 636 schools, probably more by now, comprehensive high schools. So we try to cover all of the high schools with a substantially disabled population. Of course, there are some that do not have counselors assigned. It happens, but the bigger schools, the public schools for sure, most of them will have a counselor assigned unless there's a vacancy. Sometimes it will be a VRC instead of a TVRC, but most of them will, especially those big districts, the Houston, Cy-Fair, Aldine, Klein, all of those districts have assigned counselors. When we're talking private schools, they do have to reach out to us to get a counselor assignment or to get a referral, but some of them also, private and charter schools, some of them have counselors assigned as well. So when we're talking, I'm thinking Monarch, for example. That's just an example. I have our Monarch school. They have counselors that work with them. Also, KIP, and what's the other one I'm thinking of? There's another one. Houston Can. Those academies and those schools also have counselors assigned to them. So even if they're not necessarily full public school, they may have someone assigned. So still check. A lot of them may not. And if they don't, that's okay. We can put you with your closest office and you'll still get a counselor assigned to work with you. They may not come to the schools, but yeah.
But the bottom line is, you don't have to come through the school. I mean,
No.
You can do a referral, and she's going to talk about this, about Start My VR, and it's just on a website, and you can self-refer. So even if you don't have a counselor, or if your counselor has been unresponsive, or if you're going into summer and you're about to lose your counselor because school's out, those might be all reasons that you might want to get this party started before school gets back started in the fall, and you can do it yourself.
Absolutely. And that's something worth noting too. If you're not getting a response, a lot of things could have happened. The counselor could have left. Right now, there's a lot of turnover, the great resignation. So everyone's losing people. I think we've lost a few counselors in the last month, which is fine. We'll get more. But at the same time, if you are ready to go ahead and get engaged, you can definitely now use that option. I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But as you said, you do not have to go through the schools. You can, if they have that relationship with their counselor, but you can also do it on your own. That's completely fine, as long as you get in the system. And that's the important thing, getting into the system. So this is the other piece of what I was speaking of earlier with getting VR services, getting pre-eds, getting involved with your counselor. We have a phase called potentially eligible. And I think this is where some of the confusion comes in, Allison. We have this phase, and in this phase, you are in the system, but you are not yet engaged as a VR customer. You are a customer of ours, but you're not accessing those full VR services. In this phase, you can only access pre-employment transition services. So that's where the differentiation comes in. In this phase, you're only getting pre-eds. Should you get the pre-ed services and say, I really enjoyed this, I want to do more, that's when you would talk to the counselor about engaging in full VR. And here's where the confusion also comes in. You don't have to change agencies or counselors to get VR if you're getting pre-ETS. The same counselor can put you right into active services. You do have to do an application for this, whereas with pre-eds, you do a one-pager that just states you're a student with a disability, show proof of that with an IEP 504, doctor's note, and you're in. With VR, you have to go through that full application process that can take a lot longer. Sometimes it can be very short, but sometimes it may take a bit longer if we need to do testing, evaluations, etc. But let's say, for example, that you have a student who wanted to do the summer work program, and they did it in potentially eligible, which you can do. And then they said, well, that was great. Now I think I want to think about college, and I may need some help with paying for college, or I may need some help with looking into college. That is when the counselor would say, okay, great. But in order for us to help with tuition, you have to be a full VR customer, and then they would engage you in that process of becoming a full VR customer, of applying for those VR services. So again, you can get that training, you can get that insight, some evaluations done. But if you're thinking tuition, if you're thinking you need help with like you said, the heavy duty evaluations, like the 5-day, vocational evaluation for those services, or if you want job placement and permanent employment, you have to go into full VR services. But again, the counselor can take you from one into the other. You don't have to move around. You don't have to switch a lot of things. They may refer you to an adult counselor at that time. That just depends on the unit that you're working with and what's needed. But you will never have to just move around and do all these things. It's just a simple application. And at that point, when you do the application, that's when that eligibility criteria I talked about before, that's when that kicks in. So again, for those pre-ed services, you don't have to do all that eligibility stuff. You can just show proof you're a student with a disability and we can engage you. But if you want more, you want tuition, you want job placement, you want a computer to help with college, you need help with books, remember, for all of that, you will need to apply for services. So this was the slide we were talking about before. Start My VR is not on this one because it's new and we go by the state approved PowerPoints. But again, all you would have to do is put in Google Start My VR Vocational Rehabilitation. It should pop right up and it will give you the options of what to input into the system to get you assigned to your closest office. I do want to warn you, because if you're transition, they assign a little bit differently. So once your Start My VR goes to state office, they may attempt to put you in full VR services. They may not, depending on what you're requesting, but just be warned of that. So they may go ahead and throw you into VR application stage. And if you're not ready for that, that's okay. Just let them know. We can try to adjust some things, but just be warned of that. They go fast and furious, so they're going to get you right in and into full VR services. You can also work with the school's assigned VR counselor if you want to refer a student. So if you have a student and you just want to get started with that counselor, you can go to the school and say, hey, who's our counselor? And they can point you in the right direction. Again, you can also contact me. You can go to our website as well, that not just with the Start My VR, but also with just the office locator. We also want you to know that counselors can come into the schools, like I talked about with the TVRCs. They can come there and meet with you and the student there. If they're underage, if they're over 18, we can come straight into the school and talk with them. Unless they have guardianship, then we get that paper signed. But also you can go into the offices and walk straight in and just ask, hey, can I get started with services? So there are so many ways to do this and so many ways to engage. Again, if all else fails or everything's a little bit confusing, you can always come back to me. I can get you referred to the right person as well. Again, to your point, Allison, here are all my other counterparts in the state of Texas. So again, VR is available nationwide, also throughout the state of Texas. I am the specialist here in Houston, but every single region has a specialist as well that's assigned that can get you in touch with a VR counselor.
Now, who is, I'm thinking, do you have a counterpart in Houston too? Marilyn Gilbreth.
Marilyn is our community outreach and awareness specialist. She used to be me. She used to be the transition specialist, but then she went to a different position. So we also in each region have a community outreach and awareness specialist. She is actually another contact who can get you referred. If you are an adult looking for services, I do recommend that you contact her, because they don't go by schools, obviously, as adults. So she will get you in contact with the right counselor if you are an adult looking for services. So you can also always go through our community outreach and awareness specialist. If you are transitioned, she will refer you back to me, and we can get you coupled with the right counselor as well.
One thing that you didn't mention that I happen to know is a thing, because sometimes we want things for our kids that they don't want. So I do know that these services, as much as you want them for your child, if your student, your loved one is unwilling to participate or unwilling to do what they need to do, then the services do stop. So that has been a problem for some families. So did you want to just, I just wanted to make sure that people know that, because as parents, we always have really great intentions for our kids, and some of our kids don't want to work. So
Yes.
just saying.
So very good point. So another warning, it's not a warning, that sounds very harsh, but it's no word I have for it. So as a warning, if your student is under 18, you're de facto, of course, the guardian, we're going to incorporate you into the decision making. But if they're over 18, and even when they're under 18, there's always going to be a conversation with the student. So don't be surprised if your counselor says, well, thank you, Allison, I appreciate that. Let me hear from your child really quick about what they think. And then we don't necessarily shut the parent out, but we are going to ask the student to start advocating. This is that first step into learning to advocate for yourself. So if you can't tell me what you need in front of mom, we have work to do, because you have to be able to say this to the employer as well. So the counselor will very, very likely ask to engage the student as well. And if they are over 18, you're going to get some pushback if you try to call and do things on behalf of the student. We do know in transition that parents are integral to the success of the customer. So we always want to incorporate, but we also want that child to be able to stand on their own. So the decision is going to always fall with the student, unless there's guardianship, or unless they sign something, which they can, that says you are the other point of contact. There's a form that we have that says, hey, this person is also going to be in charge of helping make decisions for the case. So it's not a big deal, but we do get that signed out on the front end.
And some of the families will have a power of attorney or healthcare power of attorney, supported decision-making agreement, are all things that we see. I do. Someone said and we'll answer anyway, because somebody else might be thinking this too. What if we are just interested in pre-ETs and not VR right now? If we're just interested on that side of it, and I think that's a good question that I'm glad you brought up, because that side of the house, the pre-ETs and the summer earn and learn, there is a whole lot less paperwork for that side of the house. The VR side of the house, there's a lot more paperwork, and it's not stuff you don't have. You can download it and stuff. But as far as signing up, there's just a lot more requirements for that. So you want to explain that? How do they do it? And kind of explain kind of that path forward.
Sure. And with the pre-ETs, like you said, it's a one pager. So there's one page where it asks you, do you get IEPs? Do you have special ed services? Do you get 504 services? It'll ask you to differentiate that, but you will need to have proof that you are a student with a disability. That means we need to see that you're in school, and we need to see that you're getting services for a disability. And that's pretty much all it takes to be qualified. So with any change, you guys, it takes a while to really stick. So if you encounter a transition counselor and say, I only want pre-ETs, most of them are going to say, okay, and they'll put you in potential. And that's what that phase is for. And you can decide at the end of it, I don't want to go any further, which is fine. Or you can decide, I want more, I want help with tuition, I want these things, and you can apply. But with some of our other counselors that don't interact as much, they may say, well, then what do you want? And you may have to take some time and say, this is what was explained to me. And again, if someone's trying to refuse you pre-ETs, you can call me or email me. That's fine. That's what we're here for. We're still learning and still making sure the region is getting all that knowledge as well that I'm giving you, because some people don't interact with it as much. So if you get someone that says, oh, we don't do that, you can always come back and let us know.
Ask again. And here's the other thing that I think that there's confusion, and I know you mentioned this already, but I just want to clarify where these assessments and testing come from is on the VR side of the house. So if you have a student that is transitioning that may go on to higher education, community college, university, things like that, you've got outdated testing that, and outdated, say older than 3 to 5 years, it's probably 3 to 5 years is probably outdated. Yes. You may end up with the testing. The testing is free. So if you go through that VR route and they do a neuropsych, they do a learning disabilities, and I'm not saying they do all of these, depends on what your child's needs are. They do a vocational evaluation. Guys, that is thousands of dollars. A voc eval alone is several $1,000s. The neuropsych is several $1,000s. And these are covered by VR. So if you think you might need accommodations on higher education level and you need some testing to prove that, and this is going to help your child anyway, that is a way to have that testing done and not be dropping $5,000 to $7,000 out of pocket that your insurance isn't going to cover. But just understand that that's on the VR side of the house, not the pre-ETs and summer earn and learn program.
Yes. I do want to clarify that we have the Berkman that I talked about. You can get that under pre-ET. So that's one. And there are a couple more, but like you said, the heavy duty testing where it's 5 days, 3 days, that's going to be VR.
Well, and that Berkman is good, but the reality of it is most community colleges and most colleges do that for free. Most counselors at the high school have those like vocational assessments and like, what would you be good at? They're all over the internet. You can pay for them as a parent and stuff like that. That assessment is good and it's fun, but it's not as comprehensive as the other ones that the offices of disability are going to need to provide your student with accommodations on a higher education level. So I just wanted to mention that.
Absolutely.
And I know we're, we're kind of getting to the end here and out of time, but I want to say, from a professional that works with families with individuals with disabilities, it's what we do all day, every day. I hear a lot. I hear my counselor won't call me back, the turnover, I hear this. And then I also hear really fabulous stories where they've had, a really good experience and they had a job coach and things really went well. So if you've had a bad experience in the past, don't let that burn you. Come back, because they have hired new people. They've got a new energy and they're trying really hard. And there is the great, the great resignation going on. That's true everywhere. But I also just wanted to say that as a parent of a child that has ADHD, we did this, right? We're in it. We're doing it. And we went through the assessments and and then we identified additional impediments to employment. There were some that we already knew that we were crystal clear on. And then others that were identified through some, like the vocational evaluation. It was valuable. Was it hard for an ADHD kid to do a 5-day voc eval from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon? Yes, it was hard. But you know what? Working part-time and full-time is hard too. And that attention, being able to sit there and being able to handle those things. And so from one, I know that we've got kids with other diagnoses on here as well, but from an ADHD perspective, we've had no problem finding jobs. We've had problems keeping jobs because we go from 0 to 60 really quickly. We get angry quickly. We take rejection, much more sensitively than some of the other people. Just stuff. We walk off the job. Maybe we say things that we shouldn't say because we don't think before we talk. Some of those types of things are issues that came up in our home, and this has really helped. So they put some training modules, it was expensive. She did like 60 hours of some training. And these were all things that were identified on her personal vocational evaluation of where we needed to close the gaps. And then they had that training in place for her to complete. And I'm just here to say it helped. Every little bit helps. And just because you start in VR doesn't mean you're going to stay in it forever. And if you hate it, then you can walk away from it. But if you, gain one skill, if your student gains one skill that makes them more employable for competitive employment, the truth is 80% of people with disabilities are either underemployed or unemployed. That's the truth. And that's why this program exists. So trying to close the gap on that. I for one, I thought the paperwork was a lot for VR, and I'm pretty good at paperwork. I thought it was excessive. For some families, it could be impossible, honestly. Some families don't have a computer, they don't have a scanner, and all these documents that are required. It could be really, really difficult. But I would say I think that it was really worth it. And I'm very busy, and I don't have time for drama and new counselors and all kinds of other, moving parts or things that aren't going to work. And I would say that it has definitely helped my kids. So I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for what you guys do. And I know you guys have been working from behind with staff and stuff like that.
Thank you. And to your point, and this is for everyone, you guys, if sometimes what we do is we do these services and we're in a fight, right? Because we're usually in fight mode trying to get everything that we need for our kids and make sure, you have to fight for it sometimes. But I think when we get with any state agency and there's a little pushback or it's difficult, like you said, a lot of that paperwork, in those cases, call me, call any of us at regional office. You can even call the manager. So sometimes everyone has difficult counselors. And I know you don't, like you said, people don't want to fight. They don't want to deal with that. And that's okay if you get frustrated, but you don't have to only deal with that counselor. I get so many calls from parents who say, hey, I'm just trying to understand why they're telling me no, what's going on. So you don't have to it doesn't just have to be no, and that's it. It's okay to ask.
And true, if they're not calling you back, if you're emailing and you're calling and they're not returning your call, and it's been days, it's been weeks, pick up the phone. They have supervisors. Call. Yes. You're going to have these numbers in this presentation that you're going to be emailed tomorrow. So just know that there's resources. I have resources too. So if you're hitting a snag or you've hit a brick wall, don't give up is all I'm saying. Don't give up. They're working through their glitches on that kind of stuff. And you may have just got, a bad one. I did have, one time it was like, what are you even talking about? Like, it was a little crazy, and that person was not there anymore shortly after that. But that happened to be our very first experience with one of my other kids. And so that was our first experience was not good. It was like, oh, is this the best they got? Like, okay, we quit. We don't want this, but that was not our experience at all. We've had wonderful counselors, and I've heard from a lot of other families that have had great counselors too. So people like you, Kristen, thanks for being awesome and sharing everything with us. Let's see if we have any additional questions. Okay, I think we're good so far. And then do you have more slides?
No, that is it. This is just stuff that y'all have to know about federal funding and all that, but that's it. Okay, and then just for our last slide, just so you guys know, and I think in the email that'll come out, it'll talk about the Houston-based organization. We never require anybody to join to be a member of this organization. We want people to be able to get valuable information that's going to help their family for free. But there is a mothership, the ADDA organization. There are support groups all over the greater Houston and beyond areas. For adults with ADD or ADHD, there's all kinds of different groups. So we just happen to be one that's like for parents, right? So anyway, so check that out. You can join the group for $40 a year. The mothership group. They have national speakers. They have a conference that's really good, valuable information that comes in, a newsletter, and a lot of additional information, like if Right Law is coming to town, and they'll have discounts for stuff like that. So it might be valuable for you to join, and you can check that out. And if you have any additional questions, that's our contact information there. You can send us an email or give us a call. But thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everybody, for spending an hour with us this evening and learning about this. I hope your experience is as good as mine. And if you had a bad one in the past, I hope your next experience is awesome. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. And we are taking a break for the summer. So we won't meet this summer, and we'll be back in August, I believe is the time, like right around school starting. And I think we're going to have an educational advocate on here for school starting. So you'll just watch your email. You'll get an invite for that. And it's typically the last Tuesday of the month. So thank you, Kristen. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you all so much.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.